Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
But as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Good evening and welcome to our first night of notes in our new unit on U.S. foreign policy, 1783 to 1823. Tonight we are focusing on the Louisiana Purchase and Lewis and Clark. So to begin, in the United States in 1800, our country was much, much smaller than it was today. We could go back to the time of the colonies, and we only had the 13 colonies, and most of the people lived pretty close to the coast. By 1800, the country had spread to the Mississippi River, which was now recognized as the western edge of the country. The Atlantic was the eastern, and then Florida was the southern, as Florida was still part of Spain at this point. There were 4 countries that had claims west of the Mississippi River: France, Russia, Spain, and England. All of them had parts of that territory that they wanted and that they had for a reason. One of the reasons so many people had claims to that area is because of New Orleans. New Orleans controlled North America, and this is the reason the United States became interested in acquiring the Louisiana territory. New Orleans is where the Mississippi River drains into the Gulf of Mexico, and from this point, it allows trading to happen from the middle of the country, and they can trade globally throughout the rest of the world by sending ships up and down the Mississippi River. This would be a huge impact on America if America could control that piece of land. So, the Louisiana Purchase was purchased for $15 million, which, when it comes to government money or money that governments spend, that's not a lot, even back then in comparison to money they spent on other things. So take a second, look at the 15 states that the Louisiana Territory got part of, and what other country, modern day country, would be a part of this Louisiana Purchase. You start in Louisiana, you have Arkansas, Missouri, Iowa, Minnesota, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, and North Dakota, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, and then you get a little bit of Canada. So there was a treaty between France and America that decided to give this land through the purchase of money from America, or France decided to sell the land to the United States in the year of 1803. This is during the presidency of Thomas Jefferson. The leader of France at the time, Napoleon, needed money to fight other wars with England. He was desperate for money, didn't have a lot of places to get it. This land was hard to control. It was all wilderness. People were spread out all over the place. So Napoleon didn't really see a great purpose in keeping this land when they're being threatened by England and needing the resources to fight England. So in the end, the United States purchased it, like I said, for $15 million. That is 3 pennies an acre of land. If you compare that modern day, you buy an acre in a city, you're going to be paying hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you buy acres of land in the country, you're still going to be paying thousands of dollars per acre. So you see, for the price of the land and what happened because of it, this was a huge gain for the United States. It nearly doubled the size of the country land-wise. So after buying this land, Thomas Jefferson wanted to know what was there. So he picked 2 people, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to go explore the unknown territory. They were called the Corps of Discovery. They set out from St. Louis in the summer of 1804 to travel west and travel to the Pacific Ocean and see what was in this land, what were the uses, what were the resources, what things could the United States use this land for. So if you look at this map, you see the trails that were taken by Lewis and Clark. They set out from St. Louis, they head north into the Dakotas, and then west, and eventually once they get into Washington, they travel, or the Oregon side along the Columbia River, all the way out to Fort Clatsop at the mouth of the Columbia River. So they had to travel. They didn't know this land. These would be similar clothes to what they would wear. A lot of animal skins, furs, things to keep them warm. Much of the traveling, though, would also be by water. It wouldn't just be over land. They would use rivers and boats to travel as fast as possible, because the faster they could travel, the more productive they were going to be able to be. So in the expedition, there was about 40 people. These were all different skills of people traveling, trying to figure out what the land is, recording information about the land, recording information about the animals and the people that they interact with, trying to develop friendships. So there were three main goals during this exploration. One was to see, is there a Northwest Passage? A Northwest Passage would be a water route from the east coast of the United States to the west coast. They ended up finding that there was no Northwest Passage through the Louisiana Purchase. You had to use land to get from one side to the other, at least for part of the time. Second goal would be to journal about the animals in the wilderness. There are many journals left today that we can read from Lewis and Clark that show here's what the land was like. They drew pictures of the fish that they saw. They drew pictures of the flowers. They would bring some of the plants back with them. This was probably one of the most important parts of this journey, because there were new animals, new creatures, new land that America needed to know about before people could go there, start using the resources, or settling. Third goal was to develop relationships with Native Americans. So to do this, as they traveled, they stayed in a village in present-day North Dakota. It was a Madon village where they camped for the winter of the first year. They learned about the Native Americans there. They developed friendships. If you notice the huts that they live in, these were built for that area because of the type of weather and the resources that they have. They also developed a relationship with a girl named Sacagawea, or Sacagawea, depending on the pronunciation. She was a 17-year-old girl, a woman, who helped the Corps discover and interpret with other Native Americans throughout the expedition. She knew quite a bit about the land. She was friendly. The Lewis and Clark expedition worked hard to develop a strong relationship with her, and she was a great ally of the Corps of Discovery throughout this time. So in the end, there were three big impacts of the Corps of Discovery. They found there's no Northwest Passage. We will never find a Northwest Passage through the United States. The only one that's there is through the Arctic Ocean, but most of the year that's covered with ice and you can't travel there. Second, they formed good relationships with some of the Native American groups. They were able to develop some allies throughout the region. Some of these would be lasting relationships, some would be short-term. And like I said earlier, probably most important, they were able to record the animals and the nature of the land. And when they came back, they were able to introduce in great detail, here's what the land was like, here's what we saw, to allow people to easily visualize this area of land. So as you come to class tomorrow, be prepared to discuss a little bit more about the Louisiana Purchase, and then we will pick up with our project that we are working on. Have a good evening.